Not shocking, not even surprising, but nonetheless disappointing that the Texans fired David Culley after one season and a 4-13 record, which is not indicative of how hard this team played for him, and certainly not representative of the difficult task that he inherited. Nonetheless, many of us, including both me and Michael Holley, thought before the season that he could end up being one and done, a la Steve Wilkes a few years ago in Arizona. And so since the last time we talked about this earlier in the show, Michael, when we talked about it from a macro sense, and there's more to talk about from a macro sense with the league now down to one black coach, and that's, of course, Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. Aaron Wilson, who's pretty plugged into the Houston Texans, reports that, and this isn't a surprise, we both know the relationship in the background between these two, that general manager Nick Caserio is targeting former Dolphins coach Brian Flores, that he's the Texans' top candidate, given that connection with Nick Caserio. There's a lot to unpack here, okay? Because there's a lot of layers to peel back. Because one, and let's go micro to macro. Let's go micro to macro.
Right.
Let's start with the possibility that this is the guy that they want. And I've already had this question posed to me, and that is, would a Brian Flores hiring in Houston entice off the field sexual assault allegations, legal matters aside momentarily? Would that entice Deshaun Watson, who prior to the allegations wanted to be traded, wanted exclusively to be traded to Miami to play for Brian Flores? Would that entice Deshaun Watson to reconsider and stay in Houston, where he's, of course, under contract long term, given the relationship with Brian Flores, should the Texans end up replacing David Culley with Brian Flores? If I'm guessing, and I'm telling you right now that I'm guessing, I know a lot, but I'll tell you what I don't know for sure. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't believe so. My informed speculation is that I don't believe that would make a difference as to whether or not Deshaun Watson would reconsider and want to remain in Houston, because Deshaun Watson's issues in Houston, again, pre-allegations, went much higher than the head coach. And as much as he likes Brian Flores, I think that bridge is burned, and I think that ship has sailed. I think it came down to Cal McNair first and foremost. Secondly, as we all know, has been well documented, the way they went about telling him you're going to be a part of this process and then hiring Nick Caserio, that further soured the relationship. So when David Culley came aboard, Deshaun Watson didn't give him a chance to foster a relationship. I don't think that hiring Brian Flores would cure all of that. But again, as we both know, a lot of that's a moot point because Deshaun Watson's availability remains in question given the off-field, the sexual assault allegations that still hover over him. So just to get that out of the way, I don't think that one has nothing to do with the other. I think Brian Flores working with Nick Caserio is the bottom line. I think Nick Caserio has an opportunity, if this is true that he is a top candidate, I think it's just connecting New England dots, Michael, and you can speak to that even better than I can, that this is an opportunity to get your guy, and a guy that long ago when they were working in scouting and when they were working together in New England, they were probably like, yo, man, if I ever get a gig, if ever an opportunity ever presents itself, bam. So that's what I think it is. It's nothing more than familiarity at the top.
Well, I would say this, just to add on to what you're saying, you obviously are more informed on the Watson situation than I am, but my guess from the outside looking in is no, it wouldn't change Watson's opinion because of what just happened. Look, you could say, hey, I'm going to bring in Brian Flores, and that's my guy. Okay, you brought in Brian Flores. Now I'm ready to play for you right now. But you've already shown me that your loyalty, that you've already shown me, one, before David Culley got here and before Nick Caserio got here, you already told me that your word is a little suspect. So I don't trust you on your word. And then in your actions, you're telling me that you're not necessarily into loyalty and into fulfilling contracts. You signed David Culley to a 2-year contract. He did a good job after 1 year, and you kicked him to the curb because somebody else came available when they were also treated poorly by their organization. So if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm looking at all this, I'm saying all of these coaches, and I would overstate it, yeah, all of these coaches are disposable. There's really no loyalty. There's no long-term plan. If they get what they want, yeah, they could tell me that Brian Flores is my guy, but I come back and play for them. Who's to say Brian Flores isn't gone after 2 years? You just never know. So if his problems are deep with the organization, they go beyond a position, a single position. It's usually, when you reach that point where you say, I'm done there, it's usually not one thing. It's like 5 or 6 things. Maybe it's just like a bunch of paper cuts that add up to incessant bleeding.
Let me tell you something else though. As we think about this in real time, if anything, so Nick Caserio has history and familiarity with Brian Flores and vice versa. Given this relationship, it's not just Brian Flores saying, "Hey, Deshaun, a la David Culley, hey, come play for me. Let's win here together." It's, "Hey, Deshaun, what's up with your mans? Tell me about Cal McNair. Tell me about Jack Easterby. Tell me about the culture in this organization. You know, I know Nick Caserio from New England, but that was New England. I don't know Houston.
It's worse than what he left.
So this relationship.
It's worse than the one.
This relationship.
It's worse.
Yeah. So this relationship on the surface.
The organization is just bad.
Yeah.
Bad organization.
Right. But this relationship on the surface, people are looking at it like about Brian Flores pitching Deshaun Watson on reconsidering his stance. You might want to think about it from the standpoint of Brian Flores consulting Deshaun Watson and getting the inside scoop on Houston. That relation, and not to mention, man, listen, this ain't hard. This ain't rocket science, okay? Whether it's New York or some other team, Minnesota, there's opportunities out there for these two to team up elsewhere if they really want to play this right. I mean, if Brian Flores was one of the driving forces, if not the driving force behind Deshaun Watson wanting to go to Miami, they got 7 other vacancies right now. Not all of them need a quarterback, of course, but there were 7 other vacancies that preceded Houston firing David Culley. So it could backfire on Houston, Deshaun Watson's intel on the culture that Cal McNair has governed in Houston for all these years. I like to pivot to the macro now, Michael, because this is something of a plot twist. Now, if you're a viewer and a subscriber to this show and this podcast, you heard me and Michael go smooth off earlier in the show when we found out that David Culley got fired, because we're down to one black coach in the NFL as it stands, and that's Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, of course. Well, plot twist. The top target is reportedly a black coach, Brian Flores, who, of course, was fired on Monday in Miami, and we had a problem with that, too. Some might be saying, well, hey, does that make you feel any better? Well, there you go. Oh,
no,
so you spoke
no.
too soon. Exactly. Oh, you spoke too soon. You spoke too soon.
No,
David Culley, black man got fired. Michael Smith, you said that they only hired David Culley to see if he could appease Deshaun Watson. And how you feel now? Here's now the top target is a black coach. See, there you go. It ain't race. On the contrary. Go ahead, Michael, and I'll follow you.
No, it is. This is not progress. You can't just replace a black coach with a black coach and say, all right, well, it's all good. Look, the fact remains, David Culley was done wrong. I don't care who his replacement is. He was done wrong. You don't bring him into that situation, say, oh, I see somebody else out there better. You didn't set him up for success. You fire him. You just discard him, and then you bring in another coach and say, hey, he's black. Here we go. No, this is not drop one, bring in another. That's not progress. So anybody who's looking at it that way and just saying, well, it's another black guy, you should be satisfied, I think that is a total misreading of what's happening here.
The Texans once employed a black general manager, and Rick Smith, who did a phenomenal job, okay? It's no different. The issue is not strictly numbers. It's why the numbers. So, again, like we said earlier, in case you missed it, if we are paranoid and sensitive, if we seem paranoid or sensitive, it's because we're protective, because we only had 3 to begin with out of 32. The league has a problem. And as Michael Holley just said, replacing one black coach for another does not signify progress, and not just in terms of numbers. The issue is the double standard that has existed since the beginning of time in this country and since the founding of this league, and specifically as it relates to coaches. It's how black coaches are talked about. I've said this so many times, but you might be new, so I'll say it for the cheap seats. Look, when's the last time you heard a black coach be described as a genius? As a strategic genius?
Never.
But it's always a player's coach, always somebody who relates to players, always somebody who's a motivator, okay? But when it comes to X's and O's, ingenuity, strategy, creativity, black coaches are never, if you really want to be honest about it, it's rare in society. Usually that term when it comes to black people is reserved for singers and artists or writers, literary genius, musical genius. But when it comes to academics, and I don't want to overstate football, but even from the standpoint of just strategy, no. You know, how often are black candidates seen as the hot candidate? Brian Flores is the first one in a long time, and that's because the Dolphins were dumb enough to hire a guy who went back-to-back winning seasons and won 19 games in 2 years. So this is an exception, not the rule. Black candidates rarely are the candidates that organizations decide to just skip the process to get to. As another example, okay? Black candidates, black coaches don't get the opportunity to fail, don't get the opportunity to reestablish culture or establish a culture. They're in the hot seat the moment they take the job. Oftentimes, set up to fail and not to succeed, rarely given the benefit of the doubt, rarely allowed to be retreads. That's why it's so exciting that the mere possibility that finally Jim Caldwell, who was done dirty in Detroit, may reemerge and be the savior that Jacksonville needs. Certainly ain't the coach that organization deserves, but it is the one that Jacksonville needs. Is Jim Caldwell. I've advocated for Byron Leftwich. How long has Eric Bieniemy been waiting? Okay? So hiring Brian Flores, given the relationship that he has with Nick Caserio, makes all the football sense in the world. But as we're finally saying, more than one thing can be true. That does not negate the double standards and the ongoing struggle for black coaches and executives. Don't mean to leave out GMs. Black coaches, executives, and scouts when it comes to not only getting an opportunity, but an equal opportunity in the NFL and society at large, Michael.
And just to be clear, I think we feel the same way about this. I've never talked to you about it, but I would guess
that's saying
the same
something.
Way about it.
You've never talked to me about what? What have we never talked
to you about this? We've never talked about this. Everything you said, I agree with black coaches and double standard and these opportunities, how rare they are. And we've had this conversation about black genius. It is rarely used. It is rarely used throughout. And sometimes with entertainers, sometimes with athletes, not always. They usually have to be like top of the top, exceptional athletes. Like the top 3% of athletes who get that, because sometimes guys are so good. Oh, the natural talent, the natural ability, the athleticism.
Right. It's not about work ethic, not about,
He's an alien.
LeBron gets credit for his basketball IQ.
He's from a different planet. He's from, that whole thing, but not really.
And that IQ is only reserved, for sports, by the way, because a guy like LeBron gets credit for his basketball IQ, but step outside of basketball and we know what they say. Continue.
That's right. Shut up and dribble. But we never talked about the opposite. Hugh Jackson, black coach. I couldn't really make the case. I like Hugh. I couldn't make the case that he didn't get a fair shot. That's a pretty terrible record. Hugh worked for Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis turned around the culture in Cincinnati. Problem is, couldn't win a playoff game. And after a while, I was
there for a long time.
Hey, man. Hey, you had your shot. You had your opportunity. Now, he lasted longer. He lasted longer than black coach,
lot of people thought he
white
should
coach, coach of any race, any background, any nationality. Wow. You last that late. I think he was there for 15 years.
He was there
for 15 years? How you there for 15 years and don't win a playoff game? So it's not across the board. I think we know that. But just those who are new to the show, it's not like, hey, black coach, you get the job and have tenure. And you just got the job until you decide
that's rare.
that you just don't want it anymore. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is get the opportunity that is fair that anybody else would get. And I think it's fair to say Steve Wilkes didn't get the opportunity that anybody else would get. David Culley didn't get the opportunity that anybody else would get. And for that matter, Stephen Ross, I know, is a black man in place. And stop with that. Can we just say, parenthetical. Hey, it can't be race because the black dude's involved. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Stop that. Okay? Just because there's a black general manager doesn't mean that it wasn't foul. The departure of Brian Flores. He didn't get the opportunity.
Or that subconsciously they don't view Brian. They don't value Brian Flores. Like I think I've said this before, Michael. I've been paid a lot. I don't know that I've been valued. Okay, I've been compensated, but I don't know that I've been valued the way I should be valued oftentimes. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. We get paid, but are you valued? And I think that's what often happens with black coaches. They serve a specific purpose, but are not valued. So I think the issue with Miami is it was some tension between, a black coach and a black general manager. And I'm not trying to shade Chris Greer at all, but all skin folk ain't kin folk. And that's not to say that either one of them was at fault. That just doesn't mean that they're incapable of clashing simply because they got the same skin color. It also, to your point, doesn't mean that Stephen Ross isn't incapable of undervaluing his black coach because of whatever subconscious bias he may have or institutional bias may exist within the NFL. I'm glad you brought up Marvin Lewis. Because a lot of people are like, damn, Marvin, like, what about Marvin Lewis? That's a great example. Like, look how much of an extended runway he had. All those underachieving seasons that he had. When Marvin Lewis probably turned water into wine more than most coaches in recent memory have given what he had to deal with ownership in Cincinnati. But that's
with that organization. That's right.
It's no different than saying you had a black president. Okay? So that doesn't change everything. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God.
Yes, Joe Judge got fired. Yes, Joe Judge got fired after 2 seasons. And yes, there are plenty of white coaches that are one and done. But white coaches get disproportionate amount of opportunities to begin with, and benefit of the doubt once they're in the door. Full stop. That's the issue.
What white coach was one and done, fired unfairly?
Unfairly?
Are we talking about unfairly? Are we talking about wasn't Cam Cameron in Miami? It was like 1 in 15 or something like that. Yeah. And was he one and done? I mean, I'm just trying to think. Yeah. You 1 in 15, bro. Like, I mean, come on. Like, we are. It's not one-stop shopping. I won't just say, hey, in every case, a black coach gets fired, it's unfair. In every case, a white coach gets fired, it's unfair or it's fair. No. I think Joe Judge really fired himself. He fired himself
the only reason I brought up the white coaches.
Statements plus performance.
Yes, and performance. No, the only reason I brought up the white coaches is just, I imagine there are plenty, like trying to counter this unnecessarily probably.
I'm just trying to think of it.
Well, no, it's not that. Because the counter argument is often, if he wasn't good, maybe he just wasn't good. Maybe David Culley wasn't good. Or, and this is legitimate, maybe Nick Caserio is truly getting the coach that he wants. And that coach that he wants has ties to New England because not only is he looking at Brian Flores, but reportedly also looking at Gerard Mayo, who you and I have both talked up, who you know very well. You worked with him and covered him.
He's great.
Okay, so 2 leading candidates happen to be black. But the purpose of this entire conversation that we're having is that it's not that simple, okay? Doesn't have to be racist to be racial, to have racial undertones, for there to be a racial issue here, for there to be a constructive conversation to be had about why this league, and look, they could be leading candidates all they want. Jim Caldwell can interview all he wants. Leslie Frazier can interview all he wants. Gerard Mayo, Brian Flores could be hot candidates all they want. right now, as we speak, out of 32 teams with now 8 vacancies, 1 brother. That's a problem. We'll see if they fix it. We'll see. And even then, even if they end up with 3 or 4, that's still a problem. And it's been a problem for a long time. And we are broken records, same days, different toilet. Excuse me, same poop, different toilet, same song, different verse.
That's graphic.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Graphic.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.